Hey, good afternoon. Welcome to the Junior Achievement Communications Listening Skills course. I'm here today with my wife, Candace, and we're going to kind of walk you through the importance of communication and listening skills that you would need in the workplace. So before we do that, we're going to go ahead and do a quick introduction in terms of our backgrounds, and I'll go first, and then I'll let Candace go. So I currently work for the Dorchester Chamber of Commerce. Chamber of Commerce is a organization that is basically a member organization of businesses in Dorchester County, and we support those businesses and everything they do. It's been very busy during the COVID time frame in terms of supporting those businesses, but we support them throughout the year and help them get started and get working and find employees and help them with various things that they do. But prior to coming back here, I grew up in the area, left for 35 years, and during that time frame, did quite a few different things, from consulting to the last 23 years of my career was working in healthcare, working for a company called McKesson. And in that organization, did a lot of hiring and management of people. At the peak, I was managing 1,000 engineers around the world in 16 different locations. So I spent a lot of time working with HR, human resources, and working directly with staff and making hiring decisions and unfortunately firing decisions based on how employees performed with us during that time frame. So I think bring a unique perspective that hopefully I'll be able to share with you today as we go through that. And with that, I'll have Candace introduce herself and talk a little bit about her background.
Well, hello, everybody. I wanted to kind of start my background, I guess, from college. So I graduated out of college with a degree in electrical engineering and economics, and decided I wanted to put that to work with the new and emerging world of technology at the time. One of my first jobs actually was in consulting. So I worked for a company where we would build computer systems for other companies who hired us. When I did staffing there, I did some hiring, but a lot of it was actually assembling teams. So I had to pick from people who were available from my company who had the right skill set to work on a particular job. I also got to interview and pick people who were from the client company to join and work on that job as well. And as a blended team, we built systems. Those teams could have been anywhere from 3 people to over 200 people. And learned quite a bit while I was there in consulting as I moved from one business to another. Finally left consulting and actually started working directly for companies who were big banks, trading platforms, mortgage companies. And with those, I was running teams of upwards around 300 people at a time. And they were, much like Bill's experience, they were all over the US, England, and India. So I was not only hiring people local, I was hiring people remotely and having to let them go as well. But really enjoyed working with people from all different backgrounds, all different cultures, and in many cases, all different time zones, which added to all the more reason why you had to focus on some of the communication skills that we're going to talk about today.
Great, thanks for the introduction. So as you guys can see, we've got a pretty varied background. So I think we're in a pretty good position to provide some advice for you guys about communications and listening skills. And that's really what we're going to talk about today. So first, I think we can just throw out some examples of both good and bad examples. As I was preparing for this, I came up with a lot more bad examples. They seem to stick in your mind more so than the bad examples of where interactions with staff did not end well. So Candace, I don't know if anything you want to start with or share, or if you want me to throw a few out there. But again, it's been interesting in terms of, again, different folks from different cultures and different backgrounds in terms of what they bring to the table as you work with them at a company.
Well, let me start with a good example. So when I worked with a large online brokerage company, I was stationed in Virginia on the East Coast, and I had one of my multiple teams was actually over in California. And one of the, let's say, senior members of the team, they weren't management, but they decided that onboarding or bringing people into the company was kind of hard. So after the person went through the interviewing process and all of that, acclimating to the company and knowing what to do was difficult. So he actually proposed to me that we create a buddy system, and he negotiated with somebody in each one of our locations to run the buddy system for that location so that any new hire would be able to not only kind of they'd learn the ropes, but they would also have somebody they could bounce questions off of, kind of as a mentor program. So to me, that was a great example of teams working together.
Great. Yeah, and so again, it's interesting in terms of working with folks and in terms of understanding what it means to be a good employee in terms of, and so some experiences I've had that were with folks that didn't make it too long were, once we hired them, they either didn't show up on time, or showed up late, or showed up not ready to work, which are all kind of similar in that if we have a job for them to do and they got there and they weren't ready to do it, it was problematic. And then to actually have lots and lots of excuses as to why they were late or not ready to work, as opposed to actually, really being ready to step up and get it done. And having that happen more than once is clearly problematic as you work through and work with people. So again, the best examples employees have, and in fact, I got a text from one of them just yesterday, somebody that worked with me 26 years ago. I still remember her first day when she showed up. I mean, we did the interview, so I kind of was expecting it to be a very positive experience, but she actually beat me to the office the first day. So she was waiting for me when I got there, and really was very excited about getting started. And basically listened intently as I was, walking over what her duty is going to be. Asked a lot of really good questions after that, and really jumped right into the job and just regularly performed, and again regularly showed up and did things. And it was, again, the fact that it stuck with me until now, and again still friends with that person after all these years is kind of interesting. So again, first impressions, whether it's after the interview or the first day on the job, can be important and can set the stage for your career. So we're going to go through some slides and share some things. I'm going to try to bring my screen up here for you. So hopefully I'll bring the right one up this time so you guys get to see exactly what we're going to be talking about today. So let's go up to slide 1. Get up to the top here. We're down at the bottom. So today we're going to be talking about listening skills, and again, specifically about talking and listening to folks. So first thing I'm going to do is give you some examples of some appropriate manners, and I'm going to let Candace kind of walk through some of these for you.
All right. So one of them, and you just heard it in some of the examples, is be on time. So, why? Why is it important to be on time? Well, one, it's respectful of the job that you've taken. It's respectful of the company you've taken. And, in the long run, probably a very important aspect of it, it's really respectful of your coworkers. So think about it. If you were working a job where you just worked a really long shift and you can't leave to go home until the next person comes in, if that person is late, how are you feeling about the whole situation, right? They're not being respectful to you or your time or the work you've already done. So being on time is really important. The next one is saying please and thank you. So I know your parents and other adults in your life have said to you and reiterated that you should always say please and thank you. And it's also another way of showing respect. You are acknowledging that they just did something for you. They gave you their time. And it's just nice to be able to acknowledge that they did that for you by saying please and thank you. The third one is use good posture. And you may not think about this kind of right off the top as something that communicates things about yourself. But if you think about somebody who's standing in front of you and they're nice and straight, and they kind of exude confidence versus somebody who's slouched over and, kind of not looking like they really care about how they're standing in front of you, it gives you two different impressions. So a lot of times good posture, whether it's standing or sitting, is one of the things that kind of conveys without words that you're confident in what you're going to do and you're attentive and ready to work. The next one is about making eye contact when introduced, and actually eye contact when you're talking to people just in general. By making eye contact with someone, they know that you're engaged in the conversation. They know that you're with them. You and the other person that you're talking to will have a better understanding of how you're feeling about the conversation, and you may change the way you're having it you're looking eye to eye and kind of know where people are. That leads to the next one of be kind. So probably the simplest way I can point out why I think that's an appropriate manner to have in the office and when you're working is it creates a friendly workplace. So for example, if you're working with your coworkers, it doesn't take very much to be kind or to, when you're talking to them, make sure that even if you're disagreeing with them, it's not that you're mad at them, you're just disagreeing with the topic at hand. And especially if you're a customer facing position. So for example, if you are a customer service rep who has to pick up the phone when somebody's dishwasher just broke and they're trying to figure out how to get it paid for by their warranty, if you're kind to them, they are typically will respond in a like manner and they won't be escalating. They'll be trying to work with you to get the problem solved. And the same thing. So for example, if you are customer facing and you're working a cash register at a store, it's always much nicer to be kind to the person. You don't know what their day has been like, and they typically will respond and be kind back to you, making everything a friendlier workplace. And then the last one on appropriate manners is use an inside voice. I know my parents have often pointed out that I have a very loud voice and that I should use my inside voice. But again, why is that? Many of the workplaces and offices today, and especially ones that I worked in, are what's considered open offices. They may just be a gathering of tables. They may be cubes with really low walls. And if you're trying to work with one person and somebody is working at their desk just down the way from you, if you're talking a very loud voice, you're disrupting them and they're not able to get their work done. And then the flip side of it is a loud voice often sounds angry, whether it intended to be or not. So again, that's one of the reasons why we want to emphasize that using an inside voice helps kind of set the tone for the conversation that you're working on.
And then talk a little bit about languages and language for work in terms of do that. And then I'll go through some examples of bad things to do. But what are some of the appropriate ways to use language at work? And you touched on some of those as you were talking about manners as well. Sure.
So using formal language, that doesn't mean you have to sound like you're a walking dictionary, but it would mean things that you would make your English teacher proud. So words that come to mind is you don't want to say, I'm gonna do this, what you doing. You want to be able to say, formal language. In this example would be, I'm going to do this. Can you help, tell me what you're doing right now? That's what we mean by formal language. It's clear, it's enunciated, and it kind of helps people know you're serious, I think, in what you're working on. The next one, as far as language for work, is you should always assume that you should address others by their title. So in this case, Mr. Christopher, Ms. Smith. Now you may have a boss or one of your clients tell you that it's okay to call them by their first name, and that's totally fine. But if you haven't been given that permission, you really should address them as Mr. or Ms. It sets that tone that you're serious and ready to work. The next one, waiting until the speaker is finished. I know a lot of times we get excited or we're nervous and we have something we want to tell somebody, but you really need to hear them out. Make sure you understand what they're talking about, understand what their points are before you raise your, join the conversation and speak your piece. And we'll talk a little bit more about active listening, which is some of the things around waiting until the speaker is finished as well. And then talk about professional subjects using professional vocabulary. I was trying to think of a good example for you on this one, but I don't know, Bill, if you have a good example.
Yeah, I'll give them. I'm the bad example guy. So on the next slide, I'll go through some bad examples of things that you want to do, but really you want to stay talking mostly about what you're doing at work. You don't want to veer off into religion or politics or some other subjects that would necessarily create controversy. You really want to stay focused on what you're there to work about. Doesn't mean you can't be friendly and have friends, but as you're talking with coworkers, for the most part, you're going to stay away from those type of topics.
Right. And then lastly, again, say please and thank you. It's both a manner and it's appropriate language. You are requesting somebody to do something for them. A please goes a long way. And when they've done it or they've been able to help you on something, a thank you goes a long way as well.
Cool. Thanks, Candace. Well, I'll go through some of the inappropriate things. I tend to be the inappropriate guy for the most part. So Candace touched on these on the positive side. Casual language is problematic. Again, the ain'ts and the can'ts should stay home. You shouldn't be using those as you go through and start to have conversation with folks. Do, bro, bro, the, babe, hun, are all things that terminology that can either be casual or slang. It may be language that's acceptable at home, but it should not be language that you bring into the workplace. Offensive language, again, do not swear. I know that that's a problem for a lot of people, and it may be, again, in your household where you were brought up or within your family, it's kind of normal language. I actually worked on Long Island for 2 years, and actually in Long Island, if you don't swear, people don't listen to you. So it's problematic, but it creates a tough workforce. Don't gossip. Don't talk about your fellow workers. Don't talk about people anywhere in the community. Gossip in general is just bad for a couple of reasons. One, especially if you work in a small town like Cambridge or Dorchester, likely the person you're talking to knows the person you're gossiping about, or they may be very well related to them. So again, it doesn't serve any purpose. There's no reason to do that. Don't insult your coworkers, your boss, or our customers. There's no point to that. It actually doesn't help. As Candace is pointing out, being kind actually gets you a much further in terms of getting things done and making things happen, as opposed to going at someone aggressively and insulting them. It really sets the stage for not getting things done. You'll get a lot more done by being kind. Complaints, and by complaining, if you have a legitimate complaint, this does not mean if something's going on at work that you really need to address that's a real complaint. Don't do that, but don't complain every day about, oh my God, I can't believe you're asking, you're asking me to work. We actually had an employer I was talking to, they hired someone, and on their third day, they wanted to know if they could have Thursday off because they had already worked 2.5 days in a row. And they were really tired. That's not a legitimate complaint. Right? When you're hired to work a job 5 days a week, you're expected to work a job 5 days a week. So, and then as we were just talking about, sensitive topics are not a good thing to bring up in the office. Things that you typically want to stay away from: religion, politics, those types of things that really are not critical to the workforce, unless you happen to work in religion or you're working in politics, or topics that you probably want to stay away from as a normal course of conversation in the office, just because they typically can lead to controversy that's not necessarily welcome in the workplace. So real quick, we're just going to go through some sample conversations for you guys, and this will be in the handouts that you'll get for this, but I just want to go through these real quick. And again, I'll give you the bad side, and then like Candace tell you what really should have been said. So here's a conversation. The boss comes in and says, "Good morning, welcome to your first day on the job. Pretty excited that you're here." You respond, "Yeah, guess I'm late, bro." Not the right way to go. Candace, what would be a better way to do that?
So a better way to respond would be to say, "Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to joining the team." And as we talked about before, what manners? You're on time, you've made eye contact, you've stood up straight, and you've used your inside voice.
Cool. And continuing that, hey, I'm your supervisor. I'm Juan Delgado. I hired you based on your resume. Hey, Juan, who'd you vote for in the last election? Really bad way to start out your first day.
Yeah, it would be much better to respond with, "Nice to meet you, Mr. Delgado. Thanks for giving me a chance." And you've made eye contact, you've stood up straight, you've used an inside voice, and you've addressed him by his title until he's told you differently.
And lastly, this will be your desk. Please have a seat. I'll be back shortly to give you a tour. And your response should not be, "Seriously, I got to sit here? Where's the coffee, dude?"
A much better choice would be, "It looks great. I can't wait to meet the rest of the team and get to work. Thanks again for the opportunity, Mr. Delgado." And if Mr. Delgado says, "Call me Juan," you should refer to him by his first name. There's plenty of time later on to learn where the coffee is and all the other amenities. Stay focused on the job first.
Cool. So while we're talking about presenting yourself, so Another part of communication and presenting yourself is basically how you dress, because that actually really communicates a lot about in terms of how you present yourself. So a couple things you want to look at. You want to make sure your clothes are clean when you come to work. No rips or tears. You don't want to look like you're going to the gym. You really want to look like you're coming to work. Your company may have policies that you need to follow about dress, right? So you don't necessarily need to wear a coat and tie at every job that you go to, but learn what the dress codes are. So for example, flip-flops, probably not a really good idea for most jobs, unless you're a lifeguard, right? I mean, they may fit there, but most other jobs you need real shoes. So learn, what is appropriate dress for where you're going, for the type of job you're going to. And just make sure you think that through. That's true for interviews, and more important on interviews, because you may never get to the point of going to work. But after you've gone through an interview and you got hired, you still need to show up professionally dressed, or you could get sent home, or you'll get overlooked for promotions. Again, how you present yourself is going to allow the business to evaluate what kind of work they give you, what you should be doing, and how well you'll advance through the company. So, Candace, anything you want to add to closing?
The only thing I would say is that, so obviously from a woman's point of view, you want to be able to think about how you have to move around in your job. So some people have desk jobs. That's one thing. Some of your jobs may require you to have to reach up high or hand things over a desk. And so you want to be careful that, your blouse isn't gapping or riding up on you, because those are just also not putting you in a kind of good standing overall. So those were some of the things that came into my mind, and we touched on a lot of the other ones up above.
Great. All right, so we're going to shift gears a little bit and start talking about listening skills. Listening skills are really important, and so I'm going to have Candace kind of walk through some of these for you real quick in terms of what are the basically 8 elements of active listening.
So the first is going to be having your full concentration. If you are listening to somebody speak, you want to be focused on them. You want to make sure you're hearing what they're saying, and that you're ready to go on and do the work at hand. You also want to be aware of the person's feeling and emotion. This is where eye contact comes in. You're watching, are they fidgeting? Are they nervous? Are they looking like they're upset by what you're saying? This is another way of actively listening, even though you're doing it with your eyes, if you will. You also want to ask open-ended questions, not yes or no questions. Really what you're trying to have is a dialogue. Usually work-related activities are not just a ask a question, get an answer, go on your merry way. You usually have to have a dialogue back and forth. And if your questions all can be answered with a yes or no, you're not really going to get to the meat of what you need to be able to do the job. Not interrupting. So I know a lot of us, again, if you go on the side where you're really excited about work, you've got great ideas, you've been thinking about how you could change things now that you're there, and you can't contain yourself, and you start interrupting somebody. That is not active listening. It's great to be excited. It's great to have all those ideas. But if you're interrupting somebody, you're not letting them have a chance to explain their ideas or the process that they need you to be following. And it is totally fine to say, I don't know, or I don't understand. So if you're listening, so say, for example, you're working with your boss or one of your coworkers who is explaining a process or procedure that you need to be following, and you didn't quite get it, and it is totally fine to ask them to explain it slightly differently, maybe, so that you would understand it a little bit better. Paraphrasing. So it's kind of a big word, but really what it is making sure that you did understand what somebody told you. So they may have taken a few minutes to explain something. You want to say it back to them in slightly different terms so that you both know that you understood what they were explaining to you. Making eye contact, nodding, other things that show you're being attentive to the person who is speaking are really very important for you to actually practice active listening. And lastly, summarizing. Summarizing lets them know that you heard what was being said, and that you know what the next steps are, and you can go ahead and go on to those next steps.
Cool. Thanks for that. Good summary. So we now know what's going to next. I'm going to give you some bad examples, but before we do that, we're going to see if you guys can write down a few. So we're going to give you the Jeopardy theme here, give you a few minutes to write down some things that you think are bad examples of active listening. I was doing a few. You may not have been able to see me because I'm so small down in the corner there, but I was exhibiting some bad examples. All right, cool. So you guys want to share some of your examples?
Bill, we're recording. Perhaps we need to just go through our list for them.
That whole full concentration thing again, huh? Sorry
Yes.
about that.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So active listening. So there are some enemies of active listening, some things that just don't do well. So getting distracted. Again, you may not have been able to see me down the corner, but I was looking at my phone. I was waving to people that were coming in the door. Basically, there are a lot of things that can distract you when you're in a conversation. You really need to work on focusing on the person you're talking to. I mean, one of the worst things, and again, was a problem I had early in my career, and I still struggle with it today, is that I tend to think ahead. And so my own thoughts get in the way as I'm starting to think through the first couple of words they said, or I may be thinking about what I'm gonna have for dinner later. But things are in my head and I'm not listening to what they say. So your own thoughts stop you from listening. You really need to pay attention, focus on the person that you're talking to so you can hear what they're actually saying, because otherwise it's really, really hard to have a conversation. If you don't care about what they're saying or not being interested, that's a problem. You need to find a way to make yourself be interested. Otherwise, why are you involved in that conversation? If you're at work, there's usually a reason why you're having a conversation with that person that's work related. If it's not work related, then you need to find a way to end it and get back to work. But if it's work related, you should be interested in what they're saying and listening to what they're saying. And then the next one I touched on already, racing ahead, because you know what the answer is, right? And you're already knowing, you're starting to think about what you're going to say before they ever finish. If you're doing that, then you're not listening to what they're actually saying to you. If you've already started working on your response, then you're already missing everything they're saying after that. So you really need to again, and it's okay to have a brief silence in between with the Jeopardy music playing, where you're thinking about the actual response you want to give. You don't have to answer right away, but make sure you're listening to what they have to say. And again, don't be fear or nervous. Candace touched on this before, because sometimes that can actually create that. You need to try to pull back on that. Make sure you're comfortable. You want the person that's sitting across from you having this conversation to be comfortable, whether it's a virtual conversation like now with the computers and the way things are going, whether you're having it over a Zoom meeting or on a webinar, or if you're actually face-to-face or talking to them with a face mask on. It's really important more than ever to work on these listening skills and not let the bad listening skills take over and put you in a bad spot. Because again, the more you can listen to the person across from you, the better off you're going to be. I was involved in 2 issues today where I was resolving problems with members, and the problems they were having with some of our local government literally was the fact they were not listening to each other. It was a two-way problem that neither of them was actually listening. It was a very quick solution once I was able to convince them to spend just a couple minutes listening to what the other person was saying, and we actually got to resolution relatively quickly. So active listening, really, really important, and it'll take you a long way in your career. Candace, anything to add to the bad or the enemies of active listening?
No, I think those really touch on it. I mean, I always interpret active listening to actually hearing what somebody is saying. You may be listening, but if you're doing any of these things that are a distraction, you're not hearing what they said. And that's the critical part of a good conversation.
Great. So just a quick summary of why we think it's important, this lesson that you're working on today. Your employers and prospective employers, this is also good information to use as you're interviewing. We were talking today as if you were hired, but these are all important skills to use in the hiring process. And it's really going to help the employer understand who you are, make you present as the strongest employee you can be, and basically get you to move far ahead in your career. Again, communicating at work is not like you do with your friends and family. We're not suggesting you change who you are or change your personality when you're outside of work, but when you're inside of work, it's really important to be communicating. So Candace, anything else you want to share as part of a wrap up for these guys as they're going to be reading through the rest of the lesson plan?
No, I think we touched on so many really good points. Just the, kind of know how people view you, know how you want to be viewed, and make sure that you are always communicating and being respectful with the people that you're working with, and that you'll usually go pretty far.
All right, great. All right, guys. Hey, good luck with the material that you have. Hopefully you've got the handouts in front of you, and our junior achievement folks are there for support if you need any. And we'll be talking at you soon. Have a good day.
Bye now.